Well, we better get started. I don't want to keep Dr. Herring on here silent longer than I need to. So we'll get going. And Petuwash Day. Good day, everybody. Guthrie Kapasela Machiapi. Inyan Waslaha Oyanke He Mataha. Wana Mayo Clinic El Washi Achamun. Uh, and Petuki Rodney Herring Echiab Waunglakapi. Uh, Folks, good day. My name is Guthrie Capicella. Come from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. I now work here at Mayo Clinic. I'm happy to be here with you all. Today we've got a great conversation coming up with Dr. Rodney Herring. But before we get there, we're just going to go over a couple of housekeeping items to make sure we're all on track. So we're scheduled to be together from now until 1:30, which is an exciting piece. We're not going to transition into another Zoom room. What we're going to be doing today is Dr. Herring will present up until the 1 o'clock hour, and then we'll have opportunity for Q&A after that. Please remember that we have that Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen, so that way we don't lose any of your important thoughts. I did see somebody drop introduction in the chat. It's always great to see where folks are coming from, what tribes you guys are working with, what tribes you guys are from, and where you're coming to us from. Don't forget that at the end we'll send out the survey. And in fact, I'll just do that right now, and we'll do it again later too. So, well, yeah, I messed that up. All right, I'm going to turn it over here to our special guest speaker, Dr. Rodney Herring, coming from Seneca Nation. Uh, Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Herring. I'll give it over to you.
All right, I'm going to share my screen real quick here. And my name is Rodney Herring. I'm from the Seneca Nation. And if you don't know where that is, it's south of Buffalo, New York, right on the border of Canada, and near Ontario, Canada. And the Seneca Nation is part of you may have heard of us as the Iroquois or the Iroquois, but our traditional name, or the name we call ourselves, are Haudenosaunee, or people of the Longhouse. The name Iroquois or Iroquois actually was a term that was shared by the French, or it was shared by another tribe against the Haudenosaunee in a kind of derogatory way, and it wasn't a nice word, and the French couldn't understand what it meant, and it sounded like Iroquois. So that's where the Iroquois came from. But then when it came over to the stateside, it was Iroquois. So it's not really our name, and that's why you see with our lacrosse team that will be likely be in the Olympics in the near future. We've retooled our name back to our ancestral name of the Haudenosaunee Nationals. So the Haudenosaunee are consist of 5 native nations originally, and if you see that representation of that flag behind us of our Hiawatha belt or wampum belt, are the 5 original nations, Seneca being one, with the 6th nation, the Tuscarora Nation, coming later on in history. Now there are 6 nations that are part of the Haudenosaunee. The Seneca or the Anondawaka are the westernmost native nation of that confederacy of nations. Um, Again, my name is Rodney Herring. I am Seneca, and I am also the chair for the Department of Indigenous Cancer Health at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center. And I'll share a little more about our department, some of the things that we're doing, and then what that means to Indian country and beyond. So our department first came to be. Um, I've been at Roswell Park a little over 10 years now, a little over a decade in a number of different areas. And then more recently, I always been working Indian country and the Native nations, not only in the US, but in Canada and then across the world as well, just collaboratives with other Native nations and Indigenous peoples around the world. But as time progresses at Roswell Park, we put an idea forward to create a Center for Indigenous Cancer Research. And originally, it started out just as a research function of working with our tribal partners, Native nations, Native urban centers, suburban centers, rural areas. And over time, it became a little more, our function really became part of outreach to our communities. It included educational and includes today educational opportunities for our younger generation, research and the translation of quality improvement programs into our communities and with our communities, service and patient care. We also have an Indian Health Service MOU or Memorandum of Understanding, and I'll share a little bit more about that later on. And our goal is really to look at the relationships between NCI and a NCI designated cancer center in a framework of a nation to nation conversations. All too often you hear that why do Native people have this relationship, and how did you build a center in this way? And it's really because one argument, and it's not really an argument, it's a fact, is that we're just not a race or an ethnicity. We are a political entity, and that we have nation to nation governance, and as such, we have the ability to format our research, our service, our agreements, every step we take in the context. And if you're working in a cancer center or an organization, that's the way we should be framing our conversations. It's not just as a BIPOC person, it's really in the framework of a nation to cancer center agreement or conversation, or nation to nation to health organization agreement and conversations. So, and that's based on federal conversations, treaty conversations, the relationships between the federal government, Native nations, tribes, state programs, county programs, Indian Health Service, and for many nations too, what that means for our ancestral relations that span across international waters and lands. The Haudenosaunee, for example, are also in Ontario and Quebec, so we keep that in mind in a lot of our work that we do, and how we don't exclude our relatives that are across the border, so to say. And also, our goal too is to support and be present with other NCI designated cancer centers that are interested in learning about how we became to be and the work that we're doing. And I'll share some of the work that we're doing and how that may translate to some of the work that you're doing if you're from an NCI designated cancer center. You'll see in the top corner of this first slide too, you'll see the Hiawatha belt in the background, and then also a bundled 5 arrows bundled together. In our early stories of how we came to be as Native nations of the Haudenosaunee, we weren't always at peace or working together. There was a time in our history of our nations that we were very combative. Politically, families didn't get along, communities didn't get along amongst our tribes of the Haudenosaunee, and it was a very civil war type time up for our people, and it was just an ugly and bad time. And we had in history, you learn about Hiawatha and the Peacemaker, and how they as a team brought a message across our confederacy and nations about peace and working together, and the 5 arrows is a representation of that. In one of the conversations, the chiefs asked one of the warrior to come up and break a single arrow. And when the warrior came up and grabbed the arrow, he was able to break that arrow with ease. And then the chiefs decided to bundle 5 arrows together and asked the same warrior to break the 5 arrows bundled together, and it couldn't break the arrows. And the story behind that is that, when we are in alliance together and working together, good things can happen, whether it be bringing our minds together in a good way, um, politically and through governance, working together as one, but also in a health context. And that's the way we view it with working with our partners in our communities. And especially, I think, too, working between NCI designated cancer centers, that we have the ability to kind of look at this bundled arrow approach and how we help each other out, how we can work in collaboration for the wellness of Indian country as a whole. So really, the part of this is the encouragement of looking at how we can work together as teammates across the country. And all too oftentimes, we're sometimes put against each other because of grant opportunities or whatever it may be. But we also have to think about that when we are working towards the health of all of our over 570 federally recognized nations, state recognized nations and others, urban centers, that, we're in this together and that we need to work together across the country to make things happen in a good way. So the story I shared today is our journey on how we came to be and how we hope that others are inspired and take away something that may benefit the work that you do and how you carry forward, and also the opportunity to collaborate with us and each other. In just a real short timeline, in 2016, we had the first MOU with Indian Health Services that was cancer specific. I know other hospitals in the country and other areas had MOUs with Indian Health Service prior to that. But I believe this is really the first one, and the CMO that came to Roswell Park shared it was the first cancer-specific MOU with Indian Health Services, and we've held that since 2016, and it's good until 2027. And basically, it's a blueprint of how we interact across Indian country, and specifically our relationships with various sectors of Indian Health Services. In 2019, we started the Center for Indigenous Cancer Research. And then because we grew from that and learned, we're really translating some of our research. And if you heard Guthrie's in my conversation before the webinar, we were talking about quality improvement programming and what that means to Indian country. And that's kind of what was happening, is that a lot of our research was beginning to be translated to, what does it mean in the clinics, or what does it mean to our people? And so I think, we have to really look at that, what that means. Is it research? Are tribes interested in research, or are tribes becoming more interested in looking at frameworks of quality improvement and how it translates to patient care and services in our community? So in 2021, because things were moving so fast and things were going really well, and our research was turning into services for our community, and sectors where we were sharing some of the work that we were doing, and it was being adapted into other communities, that we started a service center. And really, that was our first step into creating an Indigenous patient navigation program, from some of the things that we were learning from our research and quality improvement programs. And then as we expanded further, we're like, why aren't we having two centers at Roswell Park? Let's just create a whole department. So in 2023, we initiated the first Department of Indigenous Cancer Health at any NCI designated cancer center. And it was really a blend of research, service, patient navigation, education, and an eye towards what the environmental research and what that means to the human condition of our people. We've had collaborative discussions and the work with NIH Tribal Health Research Office over time. We've been part of First Lady Biden's Cancer Moonshot Initiative, and also more recently the IHS Cancer Work Group. But I also want to step back and share a little bit about some of our traditional stories. And I think that, for many Indigenous people, you always hear that we walk in two mindsets or two worlds. And I think it's really important that we, continually have that frame of thought about who we are, who we represent, our ancestors, our responsibilities. And this story of the Haudenosaunee really, I think about this, and it really frames how we walk throughout the things that we do, whether it be service, research, or education. And so the story begins about this person who came to one of the Haudenosaunee communities, and you just see on the one side here, our people lived in longhouses, and so one longhouse would be one clan family, and for Haudenosaunee and Seneca, you come from, it's a matrilineal lineage, so you are what your mother is. Your mother, for me, I'm Beaver Clan, and we have the Bear Clan, we have Heron Clan, we have birds and animals, various birds and animals for our clans. And so since the beginning of time in our creation story with Sky Woman, that's how our matrilineal lineage has always been amongst the Haudenosaunee. And so in this story here, this person walks into one of the Haudenosaunee communities, and doesn't look so favorable. His clothes are kind of ragged. His moccasins are untied and have holes in them, and his everything is ripped, and he just doesn't look too. It looks like he needs a shower or a bath. He needs to get into the river and clean up a little bit. But so he goes to the first longhouse and he knocks on the door, and the longhouse may have been the heron or the hawk, and they take one look at him and say, "No, you're not coming in here. We don't know who you are. We've never seen you before. You're a stranger to our village." So he goes to the next one and gets the same treatment, and then he travels on to the Bear Clan lodge or longhouse, and the clan mother comes up and she says, come in, we'll take care of you. And immediately they welcome him into the longhouse. They make a bed for him and they begin to clean him up. They begin to put new clothes on him and really, talk to him in a good way to bring his mind back into a good place. And um, one day he wakes up and he says, I have a stomach ache. I'm going to tell you to go out in the woods and grab this certain root, and I want you to bring it back. And I'm going to teach you how to make a tea that will help these pains go away. So they go out into the forest to collect this root, and they make a tea, and it fixes his GI issues. The next day, he has a problem with his eye, and he says, "Go out into the forest and pick this flower and bring it back, and pick this bark and bring it back." And again, he makes this medicine out of that, and then puts it on his eye, and his eye is better. So day after day, he sends out the family for these different medicines and traditional medicines and ways of preparing them. Each day they bring it back and it helps them. One day they go out and they come back and he's standing there and he is just vibrant, alive, and he looks really well. And he shares to them that this was really a test, and I am the creator. I've been here watching the people, and to see how things have how you've translated the things that you've learned, how you're interacting with people that are in need of help, and you really took care of me where other longhouses and lodges didn't do that. So we really appreciate that. And for that, I've shared all these medicines with you over time since I've been here. And these are some of our traditional medicines that we'd like you to keep for time going forward. So um, that's why our Bear Clan people of the Haudenosaunee have a special responsibility of being the medicine people. And I think that's really important to think about too, about one, those traditional medicines and how they have always been with us, but also how when we meet people or organizations or partnerships, that we have the same respect that the Bear Clan had for this person that they didn't know coming into the community, knowing that he was Haudenosaunee in some kind of way and needed help, that we carry that forward in the work that we do. So some of these traditional stories are real grounding. And I think, again, it's really important to carry them forward and as we continue our journey to help out in our communities. I want to share a slide here also that one of our research assistants, who is now the patient navigation coordinator, Whitney Ann Henry from Tuscarora Nation, created to support our efforts over time. And I think the first time we presented this was in 2020 and I think 2022 at Association of American Indian Physicians conference. The red dots represent the NCI designated cancer centers in the US. The shaded areas, the green shaded areas are fairly recognized tribes. And I think the purple ones are perhaps state recognized. And you can see the relationship between the NCI designated cancer centers in the native nations in the United States. And at the time, that was one thing that was really important to notice about this slide, is that the Great Plains did not have any federal cancer care. So if there are federal representatives on here, I always make that point, like at some point in the US history going forward, I think it's really imperative that you take into consideration the need for consideration of putting an NCI designated cancer center in the Great Plains area to serve nations in that area and the people in that region. This is another remake and updated version of that, and includes some of the other NCI designated cancer center designations. Also kind of popped out Alaska and Hawaii in here. And there's no NCI designated cancer center in Alaska either. And that's, if you look at all the little dots on there, those are all uh, Alaska Native villages and corporations in tribal areas, and there are no NCI designated cancer centers. It's another important visual to see. And I call these like knowing your landscape too, because I think it's really important, in the work that we do, that we know the landscape of the country, but also to be cognizant of our regional landscapes. And if you look at the east, in the New York State side, all the red areas are the Chisholm counties for Indian Health Services, and basically the Indian Health Service catchment areas. And all those, for the majority of those red areas in the New York are Haudenosaunee nations. But if you think about the IHS, how IHS looks at areas. So the Nashville area for the east includes Florida, Seminoles, includes Cherokee Nation of North Carolina, Penobscots of Maine, and others. And so when data is reported from Indian Health Service, it's often reported in a way that it's these kind of regional areas. And so that's something to think about too, and I'll show a slide in a second, what that means to knowing your landscape. So in the next slide, this slide here are those counties and areas that have Chisholm Indian Health Service reporting data. And what we did to know our catchment area a little more fluently is to look at the cancer mortality data in an aggregate fashion for all Haudenosaunee areas. And so we basically created a snapshot of Haudenosaunee data that was different, ended up being different than Indian Health Service East Coast data. So we know that some of our rates were different, our disparities were higher amongst the Haudenosaunee than say the Nashville area for Indian Health Services. That's really important in a kind of a quality improvement way too for our tribes to really focus in on cancer health disparity information that's relevant to ancestrally related tribes in the New York region. And I also encourage, if you have the ability to do something like this in your landscape, you may find something interesting that's relevant for your tribe or Native Nation or healthcare providers that really hones in on some of the disparities. I also encourage, and what we've done too, is really begin writing in some of the treaty language into our grants and bringing in forth in our presentations and kind of bringing the history back to the people in a way that it's part of who we are. It's not only part of who we are, but it's a nation to nation responsibility as the U.S. Works with with Native nations, that it's really important to bring these forward and remind the United States of that responsibility. You often hear people say that, oh, you get free health care through Indian Health Service. That's not really the case, because for that obligation of the United States to Native nations, it was really an exchange for land. And so, I always hear that, like, it isn't necessarily true in that kind of way. For us, we had the Haudenosaunee had some of the earliest treaties with the United States. The first one being in 1794 with the first president, George Washington. So I always try to remind, and bring those into the conversation that, you know, it's nation to nation, but how we bring that into the health conversation too, and the things that we do. These are just some flipping back to some of the mortality disparities. So you'll see here for us, it was really, we looked at more, because it is in our communities and the work that we do, it isn't just cancer that we're focusing on, right? Because there are a lot of other things that are happening in our communities. We have to be really cognizant of that, these co-occurring conditions or comorbid conditions, and prevention and lifestyle and how we interact. To look at cancer in one way, we have to understand diabetes, we have to understand obesity, we have to understand alcoholism, all these different things. So for us, it was really important to look at how our nations were interacting with that. And you'll see here, like many nations, that diabetes was a concern along with chronic liver disease. Some of our work too really was looking at, how, sorry about that, some of our efforts and how we created our center and now department and what that meant. And it was really like our outreach was really important to really enhance our presence in our area, our catchment area, so to say, around the NCI designated cancer center. But a lot of cancer centers have this terminology of like you got to serve these counties, but for Native nations, for example, the Haudenosaunee, we're just not in those counties. Like we have relations that are across New York and Ontario and Quebec. We have relations that are in Oneida, Wisconsin. We have relations that are in Oklahoma that are Seneca Cayuga. So we have to understand the catchment area is not, what they tell us it is. It's how we interact with our native nations and bring each other back together for the health of the people. It's really important to understand that concept, because how can you create a program for research? How can you create a program for education when you restrict it to counties, and those counties exclude a cousin that lives in the next county over or in the next province over? So we have to be really cognizant of that when we work with Indian country. Some of the outreach that we've done over time, educational outreach efforts, these are a little older stats, but I just throw them up here. Engage community members, students engage, external partners. We also created an e-newsletter. We've transitioned that to more of a video newsletter recently, and we think that's been a really good feature of bringing it out of print and then digitizing it into video to the people. We've worked with Mayo Clinic over time to continue the Native Circle function, which is a repository of digital material. It was paper and others like CDs and DVDs. Over time, we were able to digitize and update that, and currently hold a repository that anybody can use. It's a web-based function hosted by Roswell Park, and honors Mayo Clinic's initiation of that and continuance in partnership with Roswell Park through the Native Circle platform. So we're very appreciative of that. We also hold Indigenous cancer health grand rounds, much like this in many ways. And we also initiated an Indigenous cancer health seminar series on campus. And through that Indigenous cancer health seminar series, it's more about like a works in progress, opportunities for other scientists and service providers at Roswell Park or in the community to provide feedback or share what they're doing, but also provides opportunity for Indigenous knowledge and cultural keepers to come to Roswell Park and share information to employees and to staff. We're hoping to have like beading circles and lacrosse stick making and other things that are part of these Indigenous Knowledge Cancer Health Seminar series. I'm going to shift now a little bit to some of our navigation stuff and the service. And so about 3.5 years ago, maybe four, we started talking about, first we did a quality improvement program going around the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and asking health directors, those that are working just off territory and adjacent communities with tribes that serve Haudenosaunee nations in New York, also in Quebec and Ontario, what was the need at the time in relation to quality improvement and the cancer care continuum. And almost everyone talked about the need for having what is now, it's been known as a patient navigator, but I think it's gained a lot of speed in conversations, and especially on January 1st when elements of patient navigation are now reimbursable. And at the time, we didn't really have any Indigenous focus patient navigators together across the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So that was a big need of conversation. We won a grant, and then we really went forward with creating a patient navigation network across our nations. And we framed that in a way of looking at using some of these, and I had mentioned a little while ago about our treaties, but also our wampum relationships. And our Haudenosaunee wampums are basically like old school contracts, right? It's not a written thing, but it's a representation of a contract. And then the two row, the representation was that there on those two solid lines going through it, those are two vessels traveling down a river. And on one side of the river are the non-indigenous vessel or ship. And on the other side is the indigenous and native canoe. And that although we travel down the same river of life or waterways, that we shouldn't be interfering with each other's sovereignty, our political ways of being, our cultural knowledges, and in many cases, our health systems, right? Our health systems are different. We have a certain type of healthcare as traditional base. It's Indian Health Service. It's others ways of helping our people. And at the same time, just off, if you think about your adjacent healthcare system, maybe it's an urgent care, maybe it's a fairly qualified health center, maybe it's a clinic, a rural clinic. It's really important to know what our neighbors are doing. And so our goal for our navigation was based in that kind of philosophical context of our wampum agreements, and to remind our communities on and off territory and reservation and reserve of these responsibilities and knowledges that are of our two row. So our patient navigation was based on just that. We have a rural navigator, non-Indigenous rural navigator that's situated in a fairly qualified health center just adjacent to a Haudenosaunee reservation or reserve, and then a navigator that works either in Indian Health Service clinics through partnership on territory with tribes or through grassroots organizations or not-for-profits that serve the community. And by pairing a rural navigator and an Indigenous navigator, you're working together and understanding both contexts. Our cancer care treatment doesn't exclusively happen on territory. For many people, have to go off territory or reservation to receive service at an NCI designated cancer center or other cancer center. So it's really important to understand these multiple systems and have a pairing, and it's worked really well. This is some of our team members here, and you'll see on the map in the middle some of the areas that we covered with our navigation across New York. And I don't have it on this map here, but we're also run into Canada too. So many of our families live on both sides of the border. And so we'll have some circumstances where we are working both in Canada, Ontario, Quebec, and across New York with family members. And every one of these people you see on this slide here are rock stars, by the way. They're in there every day, helping, and I'm just really proud of them. They're some of the top-notch navigators across the country, and well-trained and are diligent about what they do and have love for the people. So I really appreciate their effort and what they do every day. Another element of the work that we've incorporated into our department, and this is important too, not just for NCI designated cancer centers, but for universities and tribes and urban centers, is our next generation of educators, our next generation of cancer physicians, our next generation of cancer scientists, our next generation of radio techs, our next generation of marketing team members. And we have had an ARCH, Native American Research Center Health Program, and within that program was the Akwesasne Research Center for Health, and specifically our our youth programs for training the next generation of Indigenous cancer scientists. And it's really, these students are really amazing, and we have two programs. One that is a high school program where we do programming in the schools virtually to prep them for an internship on site in the summer at Roswell Park. So they get kind of a prep course after school program, prepping for understanding science, a primer or a teaser. And then they have the opportunity to come to Roswell Park to train throughout the summer, high school and undergrad. And it's been really successful. And the numbers are higher than what's represented here. I think this were before our last updated numbers, but we've had a really a good success of our students coming through. And these are brilliant, brilliant students. Really, some of the scientists on campus are like, wow, their students are really good, and they've inspired us and taught us about things that we weren't aware of from an indigenous knowledge perspective and their views on Western science. So it's a duality of learning. It isn't just the scientist teaching the student. It's oftentimes a student uh, sharing knowledge out and informing the scientist. So it's been a really good relationship. And it's, it's really an honor to see them proceed in the things that they do, because some of them are getting peer reviewed publications. We've had others that have now entered into the Roswell Park program for a master's program in cancer education, and gearing up for the PhD program for cancer at Roswell Park. Others have been hired at Roswell Park as staff, and it's just a really good pathway. So if you are at an NCI designated cancer, these are really something we should be keeping an eye on, is how do we encourage more students to engage into these type of programs. And I think I saw Dr. Cower's name on the list here, and I just want to give a shout out to her too. And I was part of a program, the Hampton, I think it was the first cohort of the Hampton Faculty Fellow at Mayo Clinic, and it was really, the similar type of conversation and pathway that really laid the foundation for myself. And now it's my responsibility and our responsibility at Roswell Park and other cancer centers to lay that down for the next generation. And I know Mayo Clinic is doing that through the Native American Pathways program. I've presented for the program over the years. A number of our staff have also presented for the Native American Pathway program at Mayo Clinic. And he's just been a really good partner with Mayo Clinic over time. And that's how I think cancer centers should work together, is in partnership to encourage and share our collaborative effort. And you think back to the concept of the 5 arrows and the coming together of the Haudenosaunee. And now is the time to really come together as NCI designated cancer centers to make this become a reality again. And I think the partnership between Mayo and Roswell is a good example of this, through the Native Circle program, and also our collaborative effort with the Native American Pathway program. And then I'm going to share just a few things of some of the things that we're currently doing at Roswell Park before, and also, like, here's the time to think about questions you want to ask me or Guthrie or others about how we can work together, or things that I've shared that may be important, or questions you may have about where we're going in the future. Recently, we won a few NCI grants related to health messaging. Not only am I the chair for the Department of Indigenous Cancer Health, but I'm also a co-chair of one of the shared resources at the Cancer Center. And the shared resource is called Health Communications. And that Health Communications is a small media film company to create health documentaries and health dissemination. It's a shared resource like any cancer center that can be sought out. We're more than happy to help provide video work if that's something your cancer center organization or tribe has interest in. It's a small production company with a focus on health messaging. And we really use it to write into our grants to create recruitment videos for studies or messaging for services, and or to disseminate findings from research project quality improvement projects back to the people through digital media. And if you think about it, that's kind of the way of the world now. Like, a lot of people don't have access to peer-reviewed scientific journals, but when you create a video and you put your dissemination and findings in there in a culturally appropriate and fun way, more people will be apt to look at those results or dissemination. So that's what we did for these grants here. We worked with Gary Farmer, who was Uncle Brownie and Res Dogs, to create a lung cancer screening video. He went on to our lung bus and gave his experience. He talked about cancer prevention, and then he posted it to his social media to share out to the people. So it wasn't us necessarily sharing out to the people. It was Gary and sharing out on to his audience, which had a larger impact, I think, public-wise. And the same thing with Gunnar Horn, who played Dear Lady on Res Dogs, and really the opportunity to work with her through breast cancer screening. Her journey through that, getting screened, and her reactions to what the screening meant to her and her family, and her relationships to cancer through her family that had cancer. So both of these videos can be found at Roswell Park's website, but also, and feel free to share them, they're public, but you can also find them on both kind of Dio and Gary's platforms. We did a few screenings with folks as well, and some of the screening quality improvement type questionnaires were based on media and health communication type survey questions, and we just had a few stats here. And I think important, films had messages that were important to me. A majority felt they either strongly or agreed. And after watching the films, I would get a cancer screening if I was eligible. And a majority again, and that's a positive feedback on kind of knowledge improvement and encouragement to get screened. So very thankful to both kind of Dio and Gary, who are also Haudenosaunee, for their efforts, not only with health messaging, but for the work that they're doing across the Indian country and beyond. We also worked some of our other research, working with NCI to adapt some of the Screen to Save program for colorectal screening. Kudos to Will Maybe from our team for really taking charge of that program as an outreach coordinator and health educator to put that forward. And Dakota Lazor Swan was one of our summer students who was assigned to support this project, and he did a wonderful job in presenting the work at the poster competition at the end of the Roswell Park Summer Program, and eventually became part of this publication. This article came out a couple days ago, so if you want to learn more about sugar sweetened beverage and the relationships to cancer prevention, specifically obesity-related cancers, our team was awarded a grant from NIH to begin to adapt and create a sugar sweetened beverage for Indigenous male athletes, and how that might work across the Indian country. And our first part was to really put that in a way, what it meant for people. And some of the results we're looking at imagery utilization, the importance of water, marketing, taste, and building routine of what that means. And in a nutshell, it was more about connecting or reconnecting with our ancestral kind of things like water, just plain spring water, or a maple infused water, things that were part of our people consumption patterns in the past and what that meant, and really learning more about sugar sweetened beverage and the connections to cancer and other chronic diseases. So that was released. I put the citation up there. It came out just a few days ago. Kudos to our team on that too. We also have a community partner on there who is currently the director for the Seneca Nation Cattaraugus Community Center, and provided his individual knowledge to this program as a Seneca citizen and a healthcare advocate, and some of the work that he's doing. So to round it out a little bit, these are just some general recommendations that I think are important to think about as you create centers or formulate ideas of how to work with cancer centers or create centers or programs. One is to formalize a strategic plan to work with tribes and Indigenous urban centers across your service areas. The question to ask leadership is, what is our strategic plan to work with Native nations? If you don't have one, or if it's not in there, now is a good time for a conversation around that. Inclusion of strong and continuous outreach and engagement with tribes. It's great that some places start that conversation, but it's really about the continuance and the sustainability of continuous outreach and engagement. That's why it was important for us as a center and now department to have an outreach member that is dedicated to Native nations in our catchment area, and specifically trained and works with Native nations continually to provide outreach and support. The third one, I always say it's an easy one. Just hire more Native people. It's a good start, right? For many NCI designated cancer centers situate in ancestral lands of many of the nations that have always been here. at Roswell Park, we've been working with human resources to not only encourage collaboration with the Native nations, but to actually change the language in the HR to include more language around Native nation and catchment area. So that's really important to understand. Let's hire in our tribes, let's hire in our nations, and respect that relationship. Build MOUs with local partnerships and enhance trust between the health systems and Indian health services. Oncology focus. Building memorandums of understanding or relationships, whatever it may be, whether it be with not-for-profits, whether it be with providers that are adjacent to tribal communities, or with the tribe itself or the Indian Health Service centers at the tribes. Building relationships and are really important and enhance the trust over time. That also comes with the nuance of data use agreements. So if it's research, um, it's important to understand what those data use agreements are and how they can be useful, whether it's research or clinical, whatever it may be, to understand how the data is used in a certain way. The last part I'm going to end here is with around conversations of us as people. So today was cancer care for Indigenous people, right? So I presented on what we've done outward, but I think it's also important to understand that we need to also concentrate on ourselves and our families and our communities too. So in order to be a productive researcher, a productive community member, a productive clinician, we need to take care of ourselves in a good way. In a Haudenosaunee way, when we work for peace, we call that a good mind or a good way of thinking. And then when you create a good mind, it's a shared ideology of people using your unselfish mind. You set aside prejudice, privilege, or superiority, and recognition that the situation we live in is intended for the benefit of all equally. So to ground yourself in thinking in a good way and a good pattern before you go into work every day is really important. And to recognize that it may be a job, but it's also the things that we do to support our future generations. And, we have to enter that space with a good mind as much as we can. So when you do that, and you begin to create a good mind, then we also create peace. And when we create and are able to encourage a good mind within ourselves and within our families and our community and within our workplace, um, that it develops a strength. And when you bring everybody together with a good mind and everybody has a strength within them, as a team, you can do a lot. I think our team, I'm biased because I'm the chair, but I think our team is just an awesome team to work with. We come to work with a good mind, and we come to work with that knowledge of strength and passion. And having that synergy between our team allows us to create um, ideas and innovations for the health and wellness of our communities. And that's the way we stride every day. The strength flows from our good mind to use the thinking to channel our goodwill in the work that we do. And I don't just say that because it's a good thing to say. I really believe that's the way we work. And I think that when we have a bad day, others in our workplace bring us up. And if we can work together like that across collaboratives, across universities, across cancer centers, and with our tribal partners, good things can happen. And to put in the context of the good mind and strength, and also these are some of the secrets that I've had to be a great achiever, is try to be as positive as you can. Nobody's perfect, and we all make missteps. But to understand that and to create positivity is really important as much as you can. To carry a good mind in the work that we do, and we find ourselves sometimes in a clouded space, and from time to time, that's the time to reframe and either take a break or reconnect with your good mind. Do your homework and practice whatever homework means to you, but really practice at the things that you do so that you become good at. You see that with athletes. It's the same thing with the work that we do. Practice, practice, practice. Learn as much as you can. We, as people, are a never-ending learner. We are born to learn. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. We can always learn something. I learn something new every day, whether it's a new Seneca word, whether it's a new way to fish, whether it's a new way to use technology. Learn as much as you can. Be respectful. Be respectful in the things that you do, and that's the key to success, I think, is that, be mindful, but be respectful in every step that you take. I mean, that can carry you a long way. Show persistence, compassion, and love. Be persistent in a good way. Carry that good mind with persistence. Be compassionate, and when you combine all that, a good mind is part of love. And you hear that with a lot of indigenous cultures. In Hawaii, it may be seen as aloha. Um, and, a lot of our nations have that word for that. So find that word, embrace it in the work that you do. Be a good listener. And, you hear that sometimes, like, oh, people are born with two ears and one mouth, and sometimes we should be quiet. Be a good listener. The more you listen, the more you can understand. Be curious and search for continuous improvement within yourself, within the work that you do, and be prepared. Got a few more minutes. Believe dealing with stress. I think this is important too. And in the beginning, I was talking about our concept of our center and our department and the work that we're doing. And it's like it does create stress sometimes. And these are things that help myself and can help you over time dealing with it. I believe that you can eliminate stress in your life. That define your goals and assess your progress. Be available to relax, establish a support system, learn to be assertive and express your feelings. Don't overcommit yourself. Focus on constructive problem solving. These are all really important, and I would suggest like maybe even picking one of these things and working on it one at a time. Prioritize which one of these items can help you make it through your day, um, get through your grant submission, um, whatever it is, whatever, the day at clinic, I think like prioritizing and picking one of these items or two of these items and really working on and being a pro at it can really support with your stress. Also, striving is really important. So I put ing on there. And if you remember back from grade school, that's called a gerund. And a gerund is a word that's an action word that ends in an ing. So it isn't just that I strive, it's that we're striving. It's an action that we need to put into existence every day. Strive to be good, but not perfect. And, we're sometimes as professionals, we're perfectionists, and we need to step back and be like, hey, that's pretty good. Let's move on to the next. Eat well balanced meals. I think that's important. You see that with some of our sugar sweetened beverage conversations about reconnecting with our ancestral meals. Those are important. Dr. John Mohawk, if you haven't read his work, is really imperative in how we look at food. He coined it the slow food movement versus the fast food movement. And some of these slow food or our ancestral meals are really important. How do we reconnect to that? And I think reconnecting with that really embraces ourself and moves us into an area of healthy living. Get plenty of rest. Sometimes we are going, but we have to remind ourselves we need a lot of rest to reset. Exercise regularly, that's also really important. For many, it's reconnecting with ancestral sports, for example. I've been a lacrosse player my whole life. I continually attempt to do that, even though I'm retired, still play when I can and if I can. And, that's really important. Have fun in what you are doing. I think that's one of the key things too, is that when you're writing a grant, have fun doing that. I know it's stressful. When you go to clinic, I know it can be stressful, but have fun doing it with your coworkers in a good way. Remove yourself from stressful situations and use some of the stress management tips. And ultimately, this is my one of my end slides here, but for the Haudenosaunee, we have this saying that it isn't the here and now that we're focusing on. It's our generations forward, and specifically 7 generations forward. So when we're creating grants, it's looking forward 7 generations. It isn't next generation. It isn't the here and now. And how do we influence that? We see that with our students. We tell them like you're the next generation, but at the same time you have a responsibility to carry that on to the next and to the next and to the next. So our research is the same way. Let's not just build a program for here and now. How does that influence generations forward? And through that kind of mindset is how we as Indigenous people have been here and will continue to be here and sustain our lifeways. So the health of a people equals not just the health of the individual, but the health of the family. And when you create healthy families, you create healthy communities. And that would be the end of my presentation. So I'll turn it back over to Guthrie. I appreciate your time and spending an hour with me today, and I look forward to any questions that you may have. And I challenge you to take some of these things. If there's at least one thing that you've learned here today or something that I've shared, take that back to your workplace, take that back to your community, and let's put that in action. Yeah.
Dr. Herring, that was, I think I speak for everybody. I really appreciate both the work that you're doing as well as the reminders for us to take care of ourselves. Sometimes it can get hard as we're running, trying to think we can solve all the problems. And so it's great to hear those reminders. And I really like the slow food movement. What a great phrase, a great term. We do have a number of questions in there. Folks, a couple things that we'll do is we will start with the questions, and then if you have something clarifying, just let me know. And then from there, we can, you can raise your hand and we'll allow you to unmute. I don't think I can allow folks to come on camera, but we can unmute you and you can ask your questions directly. Quickly, I saw there's a bunch of questions about the recording. Guys, we do have a recording right now internally at Mayo Clinic. You have access to this via our internal shared video service that we have. I am working on creating and working with our media support here to migrate these videos to a YouTube list. Mayo Clinic has a YouTube channel. As soon as that's done, I will be sure to email the distribution list, let you all know that that they are now there. Dr. Herring, would you be any issues sharing your slides with the community today?
No, please feel free to use them. I did put a notation on there if you happen to use them in any kind of professional or community context. So you just reference this Roswell Park and Mayo Clinic in that effort, and feel free to use them.
Great. As soon as I get the PDF from Dr. Herring, guys, I'll run a participant list for today and shoot them out to everybody on the call. So we do have a couple of questions that are sitting in there. Why are cancer centers located in areas disconnected from indigenous homelands where the people are? Question one, right off the bat. Yeah.
I think that would be a question for the National Cancer Institute. So at times there are opportunities to share to NCI, and I would recommend asking your cancer center or people that work in the field, or myself or others in our team, to repose that question to NCI. And I think it's really important. I don't know the rationale exactly. I'd have to research that more. Why? And if you look at the map, a lot of the NCI designated cancers are in coastal regions, and there are some areas with multiple cancer centers. So I don't know the rhyme or reason why. There has to be some rhyme or reason, but there are areas in the U.S. Not only where there are a lot of tribes, but there's a lot of areas that need support in that kind of context. And perhaps it's like population based. I don't know. But if you look at the Great Plains, there's not much there, right? I mean, it's very rural, but that's where the cancer health disparities occur too more often. So that's a very good question. I personally will continue to ask and challenge to see how we can get more funding and support in areas. I know, I also know Roswell Park does have outfits across New York State that are not, out of the catchment area, so to say. And I know Johns Hopkins has been moving satellite offices across the U.S. too to support some of the regions, not only just specifically to cancer, but in health in general. So I think there is a movement to counteract that, and we need to continue that The cancer centers need to do that more often and bridge out into Indian country and support that way.
Sir, do you want to pull up that map again? I thought that I'm a guy who loves maps because then you can show a ton of information really quickly that's easily digestible. I thought that was really great.
Yeah, I can do that. Let's see. So I'll start with this one. This one is you can see in the east there's quite a few, but they're on the coast, right? And there's some maybe in the middle there. But in the Great Plains, there's just really nothing. And then when you look at Alaska too, it's just there's nothing there. So I think that's really important to understand, like the federal, and there are cancer centers in these communities, perhaps, like like private ones or uh, other types of cancer centers, but NCI designated cancer centers are pretty sparse in the Great Plains and other areas of the U.S.
Thank you, sir. All right. I don't want to butcher the name, so I'm not going to say it. But for institutes that want to build a strong capacity, building curriculum and community, what would be the first few steps or recommendations you would give?
I would say that, in many institutions or organizations or cancer centers, there are leaders that are champions, and champions in the way that maybe have interest in working with you or have worked with you. They may not be the executive leadership, but they may be physicians or others that are leaders in their own capacity. When you start bringing together a number of these leaders that have a championship leadership capability to work and interest, start having meetings with those leaders, creating a strategic plan with them about how to address cancer care needs that your organization, Cancer Center or University, has. And remember, again, it's not just a good idea to work with Indians, it's a federal responsibility, it's a nation to nation responsibility.
I've always, not always, but now that I'm in this space where it's so heavily funded from a federal level, like at what point do we become sort of an extension of the federal government's responsibilities, right? Like when we have so many millions of dollars of federal grants, like at what point does that trigger go into it?
Yeah, I think it just it's I always think back, like I never used to do that, but like I always thought it, but I never wrote in there. But start writing those treaties in there, and many tribes have treaties or different agreements over time, historical agreements. Some in the form of treaties, some in the form of, for us, like wampum belts and things of that nature. A lot of tribes have their own relationship, and let's bring those back and remind what that means from a sovereign context to partnerships. And it's great that the federal government is now, and maybe has been, providing support, but let's really highlight that and make a difference for our communities. And maybe it's not just research. Like all too often, you get done with a research project and scientists will write 10 papers. Let's not just write papers. Let's make change for our community. Let's make a
Hmm.
service. Let's build opportunities for education. It shouldn't stop at a manuscript. It should be translated to our people, and not just the here and now again, but for generations forward.